JD, thank you so much for joining me today for this quick interview. How have you been?
My pleasure. I've been great. All has been working out well, and I think that's a segue into your first question.
Kind of. So what have you been up to these last couple of months? Did you pick up any new hobbies? Watched anything very interesting that you want to share?
Well, I haven't picked up anything uh, anything new. Things have been extremely busy, but things have, like I said, have worked out well in terms of changes in 2020 with COVID and going remote. I've been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate. I'm the head of enterprise risk analytics at Allstate, and in terms of our industry, insurance, in terms of our firm, Allstate, and also in terms of my group, the enterprise risk analytics group, um, things have really worked out well, gone very smoothly during 2020. We've gone fully remote, which is much to the firm's credit. The ease with which we've done that has been very impressive to me. I think part of that has also been due to the nature of our work. As essentially a model development team, the data usually comes to us anyway. So as long as we have the computational horsepower we need to do our jobs, it's really been a seamless and easy transition to going fully remote for us. So really, things couldn't have worked out smoother in terms of the day-to-day.
That's really good. That's exactly the opposite of some companies, to be honest, from what I can hear anyway. So, well done you. So I'm guessing not a lot of things have changed, but in relation to that, I suppose, was there anything in particular that you feel like you've learned as a result of this? So even though your transition to for example working from home was fairly smooth, was there anything that was a challenge these past couple of months?
Right. In terms of lessons learned, again, from our perspective, and my perspective, running a fairly large team at a large financial institution in model development, to be honest, I think the major lesson learned really is what model development folks should have been doing all along, which is do not wait until you're in the middle of a pandemic and an economic upheaval to make sure your models are robust. It's easy to say, but it does speak to the issue of building building the robustification process into your model development processes. So you are not caught with your pants down when a pandemic happens or an economic upheaval happens. And that's a lot easier said than done, because under normal times, people are competing for resources. There are a lot of time demands. No matter what your capacity, people are always going to fill your capacity with demands on the group. So I think it speaks to the issue of you have to have the processes in place to make sure that as you're developing your models, you make sure they're robust, so that when the pandemic comes, you're not starting from scratch, you're not panicking, you're not developing new models when you don't have time to develop new models. Obviously, no matter how much robustification you do, you're going to be running new scenarios. There are going to be fire drills. But if you've done model development right, you're going to have robust processes in place and robust models in place when those things hit, so you can weather the storm. Even if you're not doing scenario analysis as part of the deliverable for which you're developing a range of models, do scenario analysis, kick the tires on your models, whatever the transparently defined range of parameter values and inputs that have been defined for the project or the model are, make them wider. I mean, do the scenario analysis, really kick the tires, because again, you'll be ahead of the game. Even if you don't end up in a pandemic, you'll end up with models that are more robust, and that's never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing. Always. So that's, I have to say, if there's one lesson from the past year, it's really what we already knew, and what you have to do to stay ahead of the game in model development and quant finance, and that is build the processes in place so that while you're developing your models, you're sure they're robust to a wide range of scenarios.
Can I ask you a follow-up question in regards to that? So you talked about robustification. What sort of parameters and things are you looking out for when you build a robust model? For those who don't have one of those.
Right. Well, I will. Since this is a follow-on, I will take the opportunity to make a shameless plug for my deck at QuantMinds in September, which answers this question vis-a-vis covariance, estimating variance covariance matrices and correlation matrices, and developing scenarios to test not only variance covariance and correlation matrices, but the models that are built on them. Whether you're doing enterprise risk across the enterprise, or putting together and estimating risk for investment portfolios, what I'm describing is required for just about any estimation of portfolio risk, regardless of the level of aggregation or the industry. So methods by which, obviously, robustification is a very, very broad topic. My specific deck addresses doing this with correlation matrices and estimating correlation matrices. But if you're doing any model development, this actually leads into your next question. So I'm giving you segues here. Pitching you softballs, or maybe you're pitching me softballs. But any model development, don't only rely on kicking the tires on the inputs. Also kick the tires on the ranges of parameter estimates that you've generated from your inputs, because historical data really hasn't existed long enough to represent all the scenarios under which, all the scenarios that are going to occur in the future, in the near future, that we want to test for, that we want to make inferences about. So that's why I emphasize, in addition to robust methods, so robust statistics, robustify your inputs, robustify the ranges of parameter values that you think are relevant to your exercise, and make them wider and broader. Because if you want your inferences to be good for a longer period than 2 months into the future, I mean, and this gets to the issue of multiplicity and overfitting your data. If you want your models and all the time and effort and resources you put in your models so that they last, even though you continually update and continually test, if you want the core of your models to be useful and usable for longer than just a minute, then you need to robustify the analytical. You need to use robust analytical methods. You need to robustify the inputs, and you need to kick the tires on the parameter ranges that you're estimating in your model.
So, as you previously teased my next question, I wanted to ask you about the future of QuantMinds in this respect. So, I have actually spoken to another model developer, model risk manager, and he was really looking forward to sort of learn from this situation and implement it in the future. How are you looking for to do that?
Looking to the future of quant finance, the way that I phrase that question, I think to be most helpful to me and to us is to think of the things, to think of what, in my view, what is going to differentiate successful people, successful methods, and successful funds and firms in the future in quant finance. And identifying these things in my mind crystallizes what I see for the future of quant finance, because these are the things that are going to last, and these are the things that are going to move our industry forward. And for me, there are three things. There are three core things that I think are going to characterize any successful methods and approaches, or people, or funds, or firms. But a brief preface, because these depend on this preface, and that's data and computing power. No one will dispute that our data today is richer and more complex and more plentiful than it ever has been, and our computational power is as well. Whether it's kept pace or exceeded is kind of moot. They both increased orders of magnitude recently. And I think these feed into the three characteristics I see as being key to successful quantitative finance endeavors in the future. And I think the first is the flexibility and the ability to do cross-disciplinary research. It really, in my view, the labels don't matter, whether you're doing multivariate statistical models, econometrics, machine learning, data science, whatever you call them. The analytical rigor is what matters. Where you draw those lines really does not matter, because in the end, if you are putting them in boxes, you're going to miss things. Because data is so complex, because data is so rich and plentiful, you really have to take a flexible and cross-disciplinary approach to solving real-world problems. In a textbook, not as much. And textbooks, that's kind of a straw man. Textbooks are used to be illustrative and make specific points. So it's a little bit unfair to take shots at textbooks in that way. But real-world problems, you have to go cross-disciplinary, and you have to have the flexibility and also the ability to do that. And that means a lot of breadth on any model development team. You have to have depth and breadth. But the second, which I think is even more important and fundamental, is that, again, due to this data and our ability to analyze the data, we have to allow our theories to be informed by the data. Historically, and there are very good reasons for this. Historically, academically, there was a very linear progression from theory development to testing those theories. What are they true? Are they not true? Using the data, and it was not a two-way street by any sense of the by any interpretation. And I think we overly rigid. I think that paradigm is overly rigid and overly constraining, and we will learn so much from our data if we lengthen the leash on that one quite a bit. Now, that said, that leads me to my third point, which is, given the fact that we're doing this, we have to be hyper vigilant and very, 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 very careful that we are not violating all and committing all sorts of cardinal sins when it comes to modeling. We cannot overfit our data. We cannot model to our samples rather than the populations about which we want to make inferences. And we cannot forget about entire areas of statistics that have existed for decades, but that many of my brethren in quant finance do sometimes tend to forget about, and that is multiple comparisons issues, multiplicity, controlling family-wise error rates, controlling false discovery rates, controlling false discovery on proportion rates. These are foundational, even though they have their origins in things like clinical trials in other industries. If you're developing factor models in quant finance, you are testing functional forms and assumptions and all sorts of things thousands of times. You have to account for that when you're assessing not only the statistical significance but also the materiality of your results. So just by chance, you're going to find lots of results that appear to be statistically significant and meaningful, but are not. So very, very important. Multiple comparisons, I think, is going to be. I published a paper on this. I looked back. I'm dating myself now. 2003. But it's just as relevant today as it was, and it wasn't even new then. Decades ago, but very key, very core, very essential to quant finance going forward, especially because we are loosening the leash on the paradigm between theoretical research and empirical research, as we should. I think the horse is out of the barn. That's going to happen, regardless. So what I'm suggesting is, we do this very responsibly, and we make sure that we're not overfitting and we're not fitting to the sample, and the model doesn't work 2 months from now because we've fit to the sample. And these are all complementary things to robustness, as we were discussing earlier. But so I think cross-disciplinary flexibility and ability, allowing our data to inform our theories, if not sometimes drive our theories. And then very important, being hyper vigilant about overfitting issues and multiple comparisons, multiplicity. Again, this is a huge area of statistics that people in other analytics silos underappreciate. And so that my 3 points do link together, I think, in important and useful ways. But I think if you're checking these 3 boxes, it will be very hard for the person, the fund, or the methods that you're using not to be successful going forward, I think, in quant finance.
JD, that was a really thorough answer. Thank you so much. I will see you soon at the event.
Oh, great. I'll look forward to seeing you in person at the event. Thanks very much.